Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. My wife and I had just had our second child and moved into a duplex in an amazing neighborhood that had its own playground. We moved in and greeted the neighbors, a bunch of younger people, but they seemed okay. The first day after moving in, we found that they had left their 7-year-old, on a school day, outside our door with a bag of goldfish and a note asking us to watch him while they went out. This prompted me to make a call to CPS. The neighbors and I got along really well. The old guy next door repaired bikes for a hobby, and the next door neighbor did woodworking and would always come over to see the kids and send his grandkids over to play too. They warned us that our upstairs neighbors were trouble, with constant traffic going in and out and parties every single night. This was 110% true, and it got to the point where we couldn't sleep at night, and we had multiple altercations to the point of full-blown yelling matches. The landlord was useless and would do nothing to get rid of them, so I bided my time. Eventually, one night they came home in their red Mazda 3, which was destroyed. They must have hit someone and ran, so I called the RCMP to let them know. At the very least, I figured they'd get in deep trouble. But it turns out that the douchebag had a warrant out for his arrest for drug trafficking. He got hauled away in cuffs that night, and Entitled Woman 2 got a visit from CPS again, as they had left their son home alone again. This wasn't once or twice, it was every single day. My wife went digging for names and found the mother on Facebook. Using public record searches, we found out that they owed Easy Home nearly $48,000 in assets as they had taken off from the original address with all of their furniture, including TVs and a huge sound system. 48 hours later, the sheriff was there with a box truck emptying their house. They took the beds, couches, TVs, the annoying subwoofer system, the kitchen set, and even the dressers. CPS came shortly after and removed the child from the house. I didn't enjoy seeing him taken away, but they never fed him, and he was always in the same clothing and it was falling apart. We went out of our way to make sure he had full meals when we could. We weren't going to let a kid starve. The douchebag went to jail for drug possession. He was out on bail and hid the drugs in a dresser they took. Entitled Woman 1 went to jail for assaulting the sheriff, and Entitled Woman 2 actually had a happy ending. As far as I know, after she lost her son, she went through multiple programs to clean herself up and started working to provide for her son. I ran into her a couple of years ago, and she thanked me for what I did. I got pro-revenge on the drug dealer and his girlfriend, and thankfully helped someone get on the right path. The next one is an entitled people story. I never thought I would have to deal with an entitled neighbor who believed they were above the law. But then again, who does? My neighbor was a wealthy man who owned a successful company in our area. However, his inflated ego and snobbish behavior made him unbearable to deal with. He bragged about his wealth and possessions, and had no qualms about belittling others who didn't have the same financial status as him. One day, I noticed that my neighbor's construction workers were digging up a portion of my driveway without my permission. It turned out that they were building an in-ground pool on my property without my consent. My neighbor wasn't home at the time, and his construction worker was unresponsive to my pleas to stop the construction. I was livid. Days later, the pool was complete, and it was partially built on my land. My neighbor knew exactly what he was doing and flaunted it by giving me sly smiles every time he caught me looking at him in the pool. I tried talking to him, but his ego was too big to admit his wrongdoing, so I went to the city to report the illegal structure. To my dismay, the city officials told me that they couldn't do anything about it because the pool was already built. They said that I should have reported it during the construction process. It was frustrating, but I didn't give up. I decided to do some research on my own and discovered that my neighbor had no permits for the construction of the pool. He was doing everything under the table and without the city's permission. Armed with this information, I went back to the city and reported my findings. The city officials were surprised and immediately ordered my neighbor to remove the entire pool. He was livid and started yelling at me, claiming that I was just jealous of his wealth. But I didn't care. I wanted justice for the damage that he caused to my property. Days later, the pool was gone and his backyard was just one giant hole until he could get someone to come cover it with dirt and grass seed. Despite my victory, my neighbor continued to be a thorn in my side. He continued to brag about his wealth and possessions and belittle others. I knew I had to take him down once and for all. I did some digging and found out that my neighbor was evading taxes by making hefty donations to a fake charity that was in his wife's name. I anonymously tipped off the IRS and they began investigating him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I didn't hear anything about the investigation until one day I received a phone call from the IRS. They had caught my neighbor red-handed and he owed years of back taxes and fees. His company had to file for bankruptcy and shut down completely. He was left with nothing. The last I heard, my neighbor had to move out of his house and was living with family. He was trying to find work so he could make some money and maybe afford an apartment. I felt a sense of justice and closure knowing that I had finally gotten him shut down. It was a tough battle, but in the end, justice prevailed. The next one is a petty revenge story. I have a sensitivity or intolerance to most meats. Red meat is the worst and beef is particularly bad. Doctors recommended that I try to get my protein from alternative sources if possible, so I have happily been a vegetarian since I was 13 or so. When I was younger, my aunt did not believe the doctors and thought I was just being fussy. We come from a meat and potatoes town, so she had plenty of friends backing her up on this. This is the same aunt who convinced my parents I was faking asthma. Turns out I wasn't. Shocker. And also refused to get her own daughter glasses because she thought she just wanted them for attention. She later discovered her daughter's eyesight was atrocious. Another shocker, I know. The whole family regularly had dinner together, taking turns hosting. When it was my aunt's turn to host, she assured me that my burger was meatless. As you probably guessed, it was not. I was starving that night and gulped down my beef burger first. My aunt was smiling and I thought it was simply because I liked her cooking. Looking back, I realize her little smirk was because she thought she had caught me in a lie or achieved whatever her endgame was. Well, a few minutes passed and I got that familiar, unpleasant feeling in my stomach. It was then that I realized what she had done and why she was smiling. When I eat meat, I almost always get sick. I just can't hold it down. So when it came time to kneel before the porcelain throne, I decided to stay put. I instead took aim at my aunt, who was seated beside me at the head of the table. The next one is an entitled people story. When my mother and her dog moved next door to the entitled neighbor, they fell in love with my mother's dog, Max. For about 2 years, entitled neighbor would come to get Max for visits. Entitled neighbor would watch Max if my mother went out of town or just so they could play with him. Entitled neighbor moved across town but still called to ask for Max visits. My mother started letting the dog go less and less, but would say yes now and then because of Ian's pleading. Just before one of the arranged visits, Max got into a fight with another dog. Max seemed to be okay. When entitled neighbor came, my mother said she was worried about letting him go because of the dog fight. Entitled neighbor promised that she would look after Max and make sure he was okay. The next day, entitled neighbor called my mother and told her that she took Max to the vet because he had a wound on his neck. Entitled neighbor also told my mother that she was keeping Max because my mother neglected the dog. My mother was devastated. My mother called the police, but they couldn't help because she had agreed to allow the dog to go with entitled neighbor. My mother had to file a civil complaint. It took 2 months to go to court. Entitled neighbor told the judge that she and my mother had always shared custody of the dog, and that entitled neighbor was the most fit dog parentitled neighbored, so entitled neighbor should have the dog. The judge explained that Max was my mother's possession, and that entitled neighbor was to return him immediately. He also said that entitled neighbor was responsible for the vet bill, and no, my mother did not have to give entitled neighbor visitation. The next one is an entitled parent story. Cast, me, duh, EM, typical entitled cow. Frank, unlucky neighbor, previously UN before the edit. The owner of EM's house and the father of EM's baby daddy. Grandfather, an 83-yo farmer who takes no crap. Cops 1, 2, and 3. Backstory. For most of my life, I was raised by my grandfather. Nothing was wrong with my family life or anything, just a few sets of circumstances that's a whole other story in itself. We live in a suburban area surrounded by woods, and he owns about 10 acres into the woods with the boundaries clearly marked by stone walls. One of these stone walls separated my grandfather's land from a cul-de-sac, and up until now we have had zero problems with any of them. In fact, my grandfather was usually more than happy to give permission to neighbors who politely asked him to use his land, given they had a good reason. One of these neighbors had asked my grandfather if he could to dump the sticks and leaves in his yard over the stone wall. My grandfather agreed, as he rarely uses that part of the property anyway. This will be important later. My grandfather is very healthy for his age and still strong as an ox. That being said, he has a few minor health issues, including vertigo spells, so I've been trying to help him around the yard more and more, as well as just to stay active outside away from crowds with this virus going around. Recently, I've started the project of cleaning up the underbrush around the wooded area. A large pine had fallen a few months before and almost hit one of the porches in the cul-de-sac. My grandfather cut up the tree and removed the pieces in the neighbor's yard, but it was too deep in the woods to pull them out with the tractor. This led to me going back to that pine tree and trying to clear a path back to the house from there. I was behind the stone wall, cutting and pulling up saplings when I hear the glass door of the cul-de-sac house open and an angry lady storming out onto the porch in a bathrobe. She was much younger than a typical Karen, I would say mid-20s. "EM, what are you doing here? You can't be here." Lami. Why not?" "EM, because you're trespassing, dumbass. You think you can just hang out in the woods behind my house with my kids inside? Get the duck out of here before I call the cops." At this point, I'm just looking at her trying to figure out what to say. I mean, I get it. It can be a little weird seeing someone in the woods behind your house if you haven't seen them before. Me. "Ma'am, I'm sorry if I scared you, but my family owns this part of the woods. I'm just cleaning up back here. Remember me and my grandfather were back here a few months back to take care of that tree that fell down? I just need to clear a path so we can get it out of here." At this point, I thought it was purely a misunderstanding. "EM, don't be ridiculous. Those were laborers my BF's dad hired. You don't own the land. My BF's dad owns all this." Gestures with her hand. "Now I'll tell you one more time to get out before I call the cops." Now I'm thinking I might be dealing with a genuine idiot as outside our property boundaries. The woods are owned by the town water plant and don't have public access. But I'm also taken aback that she referred to us as laborers. Me. "Guess you're going to have to call the cops then, because I ain't moving. I don't care what you, your BF, or your BF's dad says." I shrug as I lean back against the wall and pull out my phone to call my grandfather to tell him where I was. He tells me he'll be there in a few minutes and to hang tight. She then dramatically proceeds to call cop and tells them there's a shady individual on her property refusing to leave and she's afraid for her life. I start getting nervous at this point, even though all I have on me is a hooked branch cutter. So I call up the police non-emergency number, briefly explain the situation as just a land dispute that got out of hand, and that I am unarmed and waiting on my own property, and that I have never left my own property. He assured me that it would be settled when the officers arrive, which didn't help my nerves. Just then, I hear my grandfather pull up and see him walking through the yard towards us. "EM. What? Stay back, you can't come in my yard." Grandfather growls. "Keep your mouth shut, you dumb broad." He growled as he walked over to me and climbed over the wall so he was on my side. Grandfather. "Now who the hell do you think you are and why are you yelling at my granddaughter?" M. "My BF's dad owns all this and both if you are going to get arrested for trespassing." My grandfather let out a dramatic, indignant laugh. Grandfather. "Oh, did he tell you that? Well, you're in for quite the shock, and your BF's dad is in for quite the talk." After them yelling back and forth for a few minutes, 2 cop cars pull up and 3 officers come walking into the yard. As soon as they do, she starts screaming again about how we have no right to be in the woods behind her house where we can see her kids inside. Cop 1, looks to G, "Sir, do you own the property behind this wall?" Grandfather. "Yes, sir, I do." Pulls out his wallet to show his address. Cop 1, eyeing his license. "Sir, this address is for down the street." Me. "Correct, but if you look on Google Maps, it shows the property boundaries of that address reach out through the woods and end at this wall." I hand him my phone, which already has Google Maps open showing our exact location within the boundary of the property. Cop 2. "Yep, she's right. So what were you all doing back here if you don't mind me asking?" We explained the situation of the tree and how we were working to remove the remnants. Meanwhile, the other officer was taking a statement from EM grandfather. "I know the owner of this house. He's a good guy. I give him permission to dump his leaves and stuff behind the wall, but I've never seen her before, so I don't know where she got those crazy ideas. But I'm definitely going to have a talk with Frank when he gets home." Cop 1, she already called him up and he's on his way now. "Do you mind sticking around for a little until he gets here?" Grandfather. "Sure, we got nothing to do. The cops walked us to my grandfather's truck where we waited about 10 minutes for Frank to pull in. When he did, he immediately walked over to the truck. Frank. Grandfather's first name. OP! What's going on? Someone was hiding out in the woods. Are you okay? Did you see him? To clarify, we have had an issue in the past with people running from cops and hiding in our woods. It took a second for us to realize he thought that maybe EM saw one and we came to chase him out. Me. Not exactly. At this point, 2 cops are around us again, but being 2 old guys who obviously pose zero threat, they're noticeably relaxed and kind of let them talk it out. Frank explains that EM is his granddaughter's mother and his son had made some mistakes and currently both were staying with him while they tried to find a place of their own. He thinks maybe his son told some lies to make him look better. Grandfather. Well, I hate to say it, but your son made some big mistakes. She's crazy. Frank. Oh, you have no idea. The other cop is still talking to EM who won't stop screaming about not wanting us being able to see into the living room, especially my grandfather, a creepy old man. My blood is boiling at this point. My grandpa is the type of person who would gladly throw his life away to save a child, any child, even a stranger's. Frank heard this too and ordered EM inside at once. He told the cops he needed to have a talk with both her and his son about their living situation, but they might want to remain nearby in case she tries to call again for whatever reason. Me and my grandfather are given the clear to go but leave our contact information. Found out later that week that EM was getting evicted for a number of reasons, with this little incident being the last straw. He's also filing for custody of his granddaughter because EM refuses to get a job yet still has money for weed yet keeps asking Frank for money to take care of his granddaughter. I really feel bad for her in this situation, but I have no sympathy for EM whatsoever. Entitlement at its best. The next one is an entitled people story. I often say the most evil person I've ever met was a 9-year-old girl. This is the story of what earned her that title. This happened 12 years ago. I was 8 at the time, so some of the details are a bit hazy. This story is a mix of my memories and some details I didn't find out until much later. The titular popular girl was Julie. We were friends before elementary school, but I never thought she was a nice person. Her earlier crimes ranged from destroying one of my Barbies when we were 5 to spreading the news of my parents' divorce to the whole school when we were 7, before I was informed of it. That last one pretty much destroyed our friendship, especially after she got no punishment from either the school or her parents. It was also the event that made me realize that complaining about her to teachers or the principal was useless. I wasn't the only girl that she treated that way. Unfortunately, Julie's family was rich, so the school allowed her to get away with anything she did. And if we so much as said something remotely negative about her, a teacher was likely to scold us for hurting her feelings. Which brings us to 2nd grade. I befriended Emma, a new student, early in the school year. Emma came from a family of Italian immigrants and moved to my country when she was 6. She knew my language but spoke with a really strong accent and had trouble with some words. I didn't mind and we quickly became best friends. Julie, on the other hand, thought that was a good reason to pick on her. From my previous experience, I knew Julie was a manipulative bully, so I warned Emma, and she kept her distance. Another classmate I was friends with was Lola. She had a disability. I was too young to understand what it was, and I'm not sure to this day. For a while I thought it was Down syndrome, but quickly understood that wasn't the case. I don't think I'm informed enough to explain it, but all I'll say is that Lola was easily the sweetest, most thoughtful person I'd ever met. She was an amazing friend, and everyone knew and loved her. She was the last person anyone would ever want to hurt. Or so I thought. One day our teacher asked all the girls to see her after class. Julie wasn't there. She wasn't in our class. And Lola hadn't come to school that day. This next part is hard to write, and I'm pretty sure it will be hard to read. Once we were settled, she told us that sometime during recess the previous day, someone had led Lola to the girls' bathroom, pulled down her pants, and used a green felt-tip pen to draw on her privates. Lola apparently didn't protest or fight back. Her mother didn't find out until later that day, when she helped her undress to take a shower. When we asked our teacher if they knew who'd done it, she said that Lola had told her mom it was Emma. Emma panicked and I jumped to her defense. I told the teacher she had been with me during recess the previous day, and there was no way she could have done it. As I later found out, that didn't really matter. The school was looking for someone to blame and was satisfied with using the immigrant new girl as a scapegoat. They were already threatening to kick Emma out of the school no matter how much her friends and family insisted she hadn't done anything wrong. Thankfully, our teacher knew Emma and didn't believe she'd do anything that evil. So when we gave her the alibi, she believed us and pressured the school to make sure Lola was the culprit. Lola's mom, who also didn't think Emma had done it, asked her again. Again, Lola said Emma, but then her mom asked her if anyone had told her to say that. Lola said, "Yes, Julie." Julie had taken Lola to the bathroom, done that awful thing, and said, "If anyone asks, Emma did this to you." Lola, who didn't understand what had happened, complied and did just that. And did anyone punish Julie? Did she get kicked out of school like Emma was going to be? Did she get so much as a warning for what she'd done? No. The school buried everything. They were forced to admit Emma was innocent but didn't say anything else. As far as anyone knew, no one knew who'd actually done it. The only reason I found out the truth is that I was friends with Emma. It took me a while to accept it, but that was when I realized that school was never going to protect me or my friends. Emma changed schools after 4th grade and I joined her 2 years later. We went through high school together and we now attend the same university. We're still best friends. Luckily, Lola didn't seem too affected by what had happened. She never changed. For as long as I knew her, she was the kindest, happiest soul in existence. She was still in that school when I left. I haven't seen or heard from her in years, but I sincerely hope she's doing well. I miss her dearly. Julie was never even scolded for anything she did while in that school. She stayed there for as long as I did and kept bullying me until I left. She wasn't my worst bully, but was by far the one I hated the most. Years after I left, Julie started trying to follow me on Instagram. I DM'd her to stop. She had the audacity to ask me why. So I reminded her of every awful thing she'd done to me and my friends while we studied together. She got annoyed, tried to feign ignorance, and then told me to move on and let it go, before calling me insane for refusing to do so. I told her to go duck herself and blocked her. Haven't spoken to her since. I have no idea where she is now, nor do I care enough to find out. To this day, this incident was the most evil act of hatred and bullying I've ever had the disgrace of knowing about. And it was done by a 9-year-old. Who got away with it. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.